Now fold a woven medium-weight fabric in half. Place the fabric under the presser foot with the folded edge to the right. Lower your presser foot and serge a 4-thread overlock seam. At the end of your seam, chain off for several inches. Do not pull at the threads because you may bend or break your needles. Cut the thread chain using the thread cutter on the left side of your serger. Examine your sample to ensure your tension settings are correct. The upper looper or green thread should be flat on top of the fabric and lock with the lower looper or blue thread along the edge of the fabric. The lower looper or blue thread should be flat on the underside of the fabric and lock with the upper looper or green thread along the edge of the fabric. The needle thread should lie mainly on the top of the fabric, like rows of normal straight sewing. Thread tensions will vary according to the type and thickness of your thread and fabric. In most cases, these tensions will only vary slightly. Turning the tension dial to a lower number gives you less tension, and a higher number, more tension. Or, depending upon your fabric, you may need to adjust your presser foot pressure. The presser foot pressure lever is located on the left side of the machine. This controls how much push your presser foot puts on your fabric. Test your stitch on a scrap of your project's fabric first. Depending upon the type of fabric you're using, you may want to adjust your stitch length. The stitch length dial is located on the right side of your Husqvarna Husqvarna. You can adjust your stitch length from 0.8 millimeters for rolled edge to 5 millimeters. A normal stitch length for woven medium weight fabrics is 2.5 millimeters or N. The higher the number, the longer the stitch length. To practice adjusting the stitch length, turn your stitch length dial to 5 millimeters. Fold your woven medium weight fabric in half. Place your fabric under the presser foot. Serge along the edge, stopping every inch, decreasing the stitch length. Use a short stitch length on lightweight fabrics. Longer stitch lengths can be used for specialty techniques such as gathering and on heavier fabrics. Before proceeding to the next technique, return your stitch length to 2.5 millimeters or N. The distance between the needle and the outer edge of the fabric is called stitch width or cutting width. The stitch or cutting width dial on your Husqvarna Husqvarna is located just below the throat plate. You can set your cutting width between 5 to 7 millimeters depending upon the type of fabric or technique. As you turn the dial, your cutting blade moves. Normal stitch or cutting width is 5.5 millimeters or N on the stitch or cutting width dial. An arrow on the machine indicates your selected cutting width. To practice, adjust your cutting width by turning the dial to 5 millimeters. Use a woven medium weight fabric. Serge along one edge of your fabric. Now, adjust your stitch or cutting width to 7 millimeters. Serge along the opposite edge of your fabric. This adjustment allows you to achieve the best stitch possible on all fabric types. If thread loops form off the edge of your fabric, turn your stitch or cutting width dial to a higher number. Less fabric will be trimmed away. Or if your fabric puckers with the overlock seam, turn the dial to a lower number, cutting away more fabric as you sew. Before proceeding to the next technique, return your stitch or cutting width dial to 5.5 millimeters or N. To secure the beginning of a seam, fold your woven medium weight fabric in half. Stitch 2 to 3 stitches into the fabric, then stop sewing. Raise the presser foot. Bring the chain around and back under the presser foot and toward the cutter. Lower the presser foot. Sew, catching the thread chain in your seam and cutting off the excess chain. To secure the end of a seam, sew to the end of the fabric. Raise the foot to release the thread tensions and pull the fabric 1 inch from the foot toward the back. Insert the fabric back under the foot about an inch from the end and serge over the previous stitching, locking your seam. Most ends are secured during garment construction, therefore it's not always necessary to lock ends. Differential feed prevents puckering on lightweight fabrics and stretching of knits, which may occur when serging. Your Husqvarna has 2 sets of feed teeth. Each set of feed teeth has an individual feed mechanism, enabling the feeding of the fabric at a different ratio. A 1-to-1 ratio, or N normal, finds each set of feed teeth feeding at the same pace. When you set your differential feed to a lower number like 0.5, the front feed teeth run slower than the back feed teeth, holding the fabric taut under the presser foot. A higher number like 2.5 is the opposite, running your front feed teeth faster than the back, pushing the fabric together underneath the foot. This dial located on the right-hand side of your Husqvarna Husqvarna adjusts the differential feed. Use a lower number to prevent puckering when serging lightweight fabrics. With your differential feed set at N or normal, serge one side of a silky fabric like tricot. There may be slight puckering. Now, turn your differential feed dial to the lower setting of 0.5. Serge another seam along the other side of the same fabric. The seam will be pucker-free. A higher differential feed setting, or larger number of 2.0 to 2.5, eliminates wavy seams when serging stretch knits, such as ribbing or sweater knits. To begin, set the differential feed to the N or normal setting. Using a piece of stretchy knit fabric, serge with the stretch of the fabric. Your seam will stretch and wave. Change your differential feed to a higher setting of 2.5. Serge the opposite edge of your sample. This seam will lie flat. With your differential feed set at 2.5, place a piece of lightweight woven fabric under the presser foot and serge 1 inch. Place the forefinger of your left hand behind the presser foot and apply a small amount of pressure to the fabric as it emerges from under the presser foot. After the length of fabric has been gathered, leave about a 10 to 12 inch thread tail, as you may wish to adjust your gathers. Neatly finished and adjustable gathers, perfect for ruffles around a pillow or for gathering a skirt. The 3-thread overlock seam affords maximum stretch on knits or a lighter edge finish for medium to lightweight fabrics. Let's refer to the sewing advisor to set your Husqvarna to perform a 3-thread overlock stitch. In the auto mode, touch your stitch selection button to bring up the 3-thread wide overlock stitch. Again, your stitch selection button is indicated by the drawn stitch. A B should appear in your sewing advisor window next to the auto mode. Next, check your fabric selection. For this technique, use a knit medium weight fabric. To select your fabric, simply touch the Fabric Selection button. This is the button located above the drawing of the square of fabric. A number 4 will appear next to the Auto mode and stitch letter. Your sewing advisor should now say Auto B4. Once your technique and fabric are selected, rely upon your sewing advisor to guide you every step of the way. Your stitch length should be set at N or normal. Differential feed at 1.5. Stitch finger in the N position. The next setting is needles. For a wide 3-thread overlock stitch, your sewing advisor suggests you use only the left or C needle. 2 separate screws indicated by C for left needle and D for right needle hold the needles in your Husqvarna Husqvarna. To remove the right or D needle, bring your needles to the highest position. With the needle still threaded, use the Allen wrench in your accessory box to loosen the D or right needle screw. Leaving your needle threaded ensures you will not drop the needle down into the machine. Slide the needle straight down out of the needle shaft. Retighten the D screw. Now, snip the right needle thread. Place the needle in a safe spot like the accessory box. Unthread the right needle tension. Continuing, your stitch and cutting width should be set at N or normal. Then, check the tension settings. You'll notice a blank space for the right needle tension setting. This means the right needle thread will not be used for this technique. Fold a knit medium weight fabric in half and serge a 3-thread overlock seam. The 3-thread overlock stitch is perfect for finishing edges before garment construction, preventing raveling of your fabric, plus providing a more professional finish inside your garment. Your serger has unlimited decorative possibilities using different threads like metallic, top stitching, pearl cotton, and rayon threads, or fine yarns or embroidery floss to embellish an edge. Use decorative threads in the upper and or lower loopers. Thread decorative or specialty thread through the upper looper. Pearl crown rayon thread is being used here. As mentioned, use the thread net to prevent your thread from slipping off the spool. When working with heavier decorative threads, you'll need to loosen your tension. The general rule is the heavier the thread, the lower the tension number. This would also be an ideal time to sew at half speed. Due to the weight of the thread, your stitch will be more consistent at a reduced speed. Simply flip your sewing speed switch located on the right-hand side of your serger. Select Knit Medium using the Fabric Selection button on your sewing advisor. Refer to your sewing advisor for recommended settings. Again, your tensions will vary according to the weight of thread you use. Stitch length N or normal. Differential feed 1.5. Needle C or left needle. Stitch or cutting width N or normal. And your tensions. Again, depending upon the weight of your thread, you may need to adjust your tensions. Serge a decorative edge. When using a combination of regular and heavy decorative threads, it may be necessary to make tension adjustments. Be sure to test sew your stitch on a scrap of your project's fabric. The very versatile flatlock stitch is used to eliminate bulk and seams as a nice decorative touch or to attach lace to silky lingerie fabric. Consult your sewing advisor to sew a flatlock stitch. In the auto mode, touch the Stitch Selection button to select 3-thread flatlock stitch indicated by the letter D. Use your Fabric Selection button to choose your fabric, a woven medium fabric. Your sewing advisor window will read Auto D1. Now set your machine according to your sewing advisor. Stitch length 3.0. Differential feed N or normal. Stitch finger N or normal. Left needle or C. Stitch or cutting width N or normal. Tensions are 1 for left needle, 5 for upper looper, and 9 for lower looper. The flatlock stitch is reversible. If the flatlock stitch is desired on the right side of your fabric as shown here, fold the fabric in half with the wrong side together. If the ladder stitch is desired on the right side of your fabric, fold the fabric in half with the right side together. For this technique, reduce your sewing speed. This will allow you better control so you can catch just the right amount of fabric within the stitching. Fold your fabric, wrong sides together. Place your fabric under the presser foot with the fold along the right edge of the needle plate. Sew the seam without trimming your fabric. For best results, allow the stitches to loop slightly off the edge. Pull your fabric flat. Increasing your lower looper tension and decreasing your needle tension allows your upper looper stitches to lay flat when you pull your fabric. Flip the fabric over to reveal the ladder stitch. The ladder stitch is an equally nice decorative touch, plus perfect for attaching lace to lingerie fabric like in ready-made. This technique is a wonderful embellishment on all fabric types, especially knits, including sweatshirt fleece. Consult your sewing advisor for recommended settings.